Richard Southern joins us to chat about some of the day's more interesting stories. Now, when it comes to UFOs, they say the truth is really out there, and we may learn all about it soon, Richard.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is really interesting. And, I guess the tendency, Eric, is sometimes to joke around when you're talking about UFOs. But, this is actually a serious story, and one that I can't understand why it's not bigger news. So last year, the U.S. Pentagon declassified this video and two others. It was Navy fighter pilots chasing objects that they couldn't explain, objects that had no obvious form of propulsion, objects that broke the laws of physics. And now the U.S. Pentagon is set to come out with a detailed report on what it knows about these UFOs. Over the weekend, the former U.S. Director of National Intelligence was on Fox News, and he said this upcoming report is going to contain some very interesting information.
Frankly, there are a lot more sightings than have been made public. Some of those have been declassified. When we talk about sightings, we're talking about objects that have been seen by Navy or Air Force pilots or have been picked up by satellite imagery that, frankly, engage in actions that are difficult to explain.
Now, the report's due to come out by June 1st. I don't know, Erica. What do you think? This could be big news, right?
It could be big news. I think a lot of that's sort of, sorry about the pun, but flown under the radar. All this news about UFOs, because there's been so much happening over the past year. Be interesting to see what comes out of that.
People think about space aliens. For me, is there's stuff flying over military installations, and no one knows what it is, and it isn't ours. So for me, that's logical. You want to know what it is. I mean, it's common sense, right? If stuff's flying over the top of your most sensitive installations, and it's not ours, and no one knows whose it is, you should find out what it is and tell us.
Everyone thinks, we're the smartest out there in the universe, but are the aliens possibly smarter than what we are right now?
Well, if they made it all the way here, they probably are, yeah. They're probably more advanced. If they can get here and we can't get there, that tells you they're more advanced, but I don't know if there are aliens. I don't know if they've ever visited here.
Hypothetically, if somebody comes down, there's aliens, should Biden and should the government, should we try to be friendly with these folks, or should we look at it as...
I haven't think, given this, we have so many problems going on as it is, that would be one heck of a way to top the last year and a half.
Question, do you believe, based on your decade of serving in the U.S. government on this question, that the U.S. government has in its possession any material from one of these aircrafts?
I do, yes.
Do you think the U.S. government has debris from a UFO in its possession right now?
Unfortunately, Tucker, I really have to be careful of my NDA. I really can't go into a lot of more detail than that.
Okay.
But simply put, yes.
All right, and now for something completely different. The former National Intelligence Director is revealing a new government report on UFOs will be full of never-before-seen or heard intel.
Frankly, there are a lot more sightings than have been made public. We're talking about objects that, frankly, engage in actions that are difficult to explain, that movements that are hard to replicate, that we don't have the technology for.
Okay, joining us right now to discuss is Lou Elizondo. He is the former director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, a Pentagon unit that studies UFOs. Lou, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So part of the evidence apparently is going to show UFOs or some, they're just unidentified objects, breaking the sound barrier without a sonic boom. How is that possible?
Well, I think that's probably the crux of the problem, that we are seeing these, let's call them vehicles, if you will, that are incurring into controlled U.S. airspace, that are displaying performance characteristics that are frankly well beyond anything that we can either replicate or in some cases really even understand.
So when you're talking about that, you're talking about how these things are able to do things that we have no idea how it's possible, given the speed and the altitude and things like that, and the turns and everything like that. I'm sure you've got the top physics experts in the world working on this. Can they come up with any explanation?
I think as we begin to look at this, we're beginning to realize that a lot of this really isn't breaking the laws of physics. What it's doing is really breaking our understanding of the current laws of physics that we are looking at. In essence, these things, if you look at quantum physics, there's a lot of modeling right now that suggests that a lot of this performance can be explained if you have a really deep understanding of quantum physics. And by the way, you're absolutely right. There's there's 5 unique observables that these things are displaying. One is instantaneous acceleration. The second one is hypersonic velocity. The third one is a bit of an oxymoron, but it's low observability. And then the fourth one is transmedium travel, the ability to operate in different environments. And then the last observable is this, if you will, this weird positive lift or anti-gravity, where you have these vehicles with no wings, no control surfaces, no engines, and yet somehow they're able to fly and frankly outperform some of the very best aircraft that we have in our inventory.
Unbelievable stuff. So Lou, when people say, oh, you're in that business, how do you explain these UFOs?
Sure. Well, my business has always been that as an investigator. I was an intelligence officer for the U.S. government, so my business was just to find the truth, whatever the truth is, whether it's a terrorism investigation or counter-espionage. Yeah, we applied the same methodologies we did investigating terrorist, if you will, operations and operatives as we did with this. And the information is very compelling. It's real.
Yeah. Okay, it's real. Are they from another planet?
Well, I think it's too early to tell. The 3 options are that have been presented, that is our secret technology, but we've done a terrible job at coordinating the testing of this technology for decades with ourselves, which is highly unlikely. The second option is that it's foreign adversarial technology, which, if you were to ask me, would be a huge intelligence failure of this country, because we've been technologically leapfrogged. Or the third option is that it's something completely different. If it's not ours and it's not theirs, well, then it's someone or something else.
I can't wait for this report to come out. Lou, thank you very much for joining us today. Interesting stuff.
Sure, my pleasure.
John, you have seen in your role the most intelligence that anybody has seen other than the president as the director of national intelligence. And I've been wanting to ask you this next question for a while. I want to ask you about UFOs, unidentified flying objects. The Pentagon is going to come out with a report by June 1st. And in the $2.3 trillion omnibus appropriations legislation passed in January, it includes the Intelligence Authorization Act, money for the Pentagon to continue investigating UFOs. John, we're going to get this report June 1st. Can you tell us, have unidentified flying objects been seen?
Well, sure. We have lots of reports about what we call unidentified aerial phenomenon. And this actually is a program that's been in place for a few years in terms of a task force that has been there under the National Defense Authorization Act. But as you correctly point out, Maria, there's now a report that will be issued by the Pentagon, by the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence. I actually wanted to get this information out and declassified before I left office, but we weren't able to get it down into an unclassified format that we could talk about quickly enough. But frankly, there are a lot more sightings than have been made public. Some of those have been declassified. When we talk about sightings, we're talking about objects that have been seen by Navy or Air Force pilots or have been picked up by satellite imagery that frankly engage in actions that are difficult to explain, that movements that are hard to replicate, that we don't have the technology for, or traveling at speeds that exceed the sound barrier without a sonic boom. So in short, things that we are observing that are difficult to explain. And so, there's actually quite a few of those, and I think that information is being gathered and will be put out in a way that the American people can see. We always, when we see these things, Maria, we always look for a plausible explanation. Weather can cause disturbances, visual disturbances. Sometimes we wonder whether or not our adversaries have technologies that are a little bit further down the road than we thought or that we realized. But there are instances where we don't have good explanations for some of the things that we've seen. And, when that information becomes declassified, I'll be able to talk a little bit more about that.
Can you tell us where it was seen?
Actually, all over the world. There have been sightings all over the world. And when we talk about sightings, the other thing I will tell you is it's not just a pilot or just a satellite or some intelligence collection. Usually we have multiple sensors that are picking up these things. And so, again, some of this are just they're unexplained phenomenon. And there's actually quite a few more than have been made public. So I think it'll be healthy for as much of this information to get out there as possible, so that the American people can see some of the things that we've been dealing with.
Okay, well, that is pretty extraordinary. We so appreciate that you're talking to us about this. Can this year get any weirder? Pandemic, shutdown, UFOs. John Ratcliffe, it's great to see you. Thank you so much.
You
Have
bet.
a good
Thanks,
weekend.
Maria.